уважаемые дамы и господа. Рад вас приветствовать на
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. A pleasure to welcome you to Positive Hack Days. I really appreciate that you found the time and you have this interest. In my presentation, I will be talking about red teaming and phishing attack methods in particular. Let me introduce the subject of the presentation. In the first part of my presentation, we'll talk about phishing, types of phishing attacks, objectives of phishers. In the second part, we'll talk about some more technical things like preparation for a phishing simulation, obviously. Next, we'll talk about infrastructure components. We'll talk about the channels you may want to use, the delivery of payload. I'm sorry. We'll also discuss the theory and practice of phishing message composition. Also, we'll discuss types of payloads, obfuscation, or evading detection, and in conclusions, you guessed that, we'll give you recommendations and conclusions. Now, who am I? Name is Vadim Shalist. I'm the lead of the Red team at MTS Red. I've spoken at a bunch of conferences. And I recently decided to start my own Telegram channel where I write my ideas about red teaming and practical security. I guess everybody here today knows what phishing is, but let's agree on the terminology. According to the classic classification, there is mass phishing. I guess all of us get lots of messages like this every day. Some of the people in the audience may also remember Nigerian happy letters. There's also spear phishing or whaling, which is more targeted. Here, for example, red teamers may be attacking members of a particular company or even executives of a given company. And that requires a lot of preparation usually. Now, whaling is spear phishing targeting executives, like I said. Smishing and vishing, again, things that we all know quite a lot about. So we get those fake bank calls every day now.
Ну и в последнее время появился такой относительно новый вид фишинговых атак, который называется angler.
A relatively new type of phishing attacks is called angler phishing.
Это будет что-то типа ловли на живца. Ну и я немножко раскрою.
I suggest calling it bait fishing in Russian.
Аккаунты различных представителей.
And this way, what happens in this variety of phishing is that threat actors register accounts, say, representing themselves as help desk people or marketing people, and then they surf the internet looking for complaints, for example. Then they get in touch with the complaining users, and they say they are there to provide help. And it does work, interestingly enough.
Буквально пару минут, принято выделять credentials, harvesting, смысл здесь сбор учетных данных.
So these are the objectives of phishing. Credential harvesting.
Значение второго фактора для аутентификации. Ну и popping shells, это в данном случае такое сленговое
Popping shells
для получения удаленного доступа.
Is a slangy term for getting remote access and executing commands on employees' workstation. These are Kaspersky Labs stats for 2022. So you see that logistics companies, 27.8%, e-commerce, these are the two largest segments. And this stats by pretext, according to digital security. So they did some socio-technical pen tests. And again, a new corporate portal 43%, gift certificates 36%, email server 10%, mystery Santa 10%, and stock taking 30%.
сбора контакт-листа, со сбора списка целей.
Usually, phishing starts with collecting a list of your targets.
Заблокированы на территории
I
России.
guess most people here will be
Не теряет популярности.
aware of this network. LinkedIn has been blocked in Russia for the past 8 years, I think, but it's still pretty popular. So you find the
Их интересов.
page of a company you're interested in, you identify the employees, you can actually learn more about their interests, because people will publish their professional information there, like the conferences where they
Опыта их
speak.
сотрудников.
In fact, there you can learn what kind of
В своей практике.
defenses the company may be using based on the interests of their employees.
Drop contact.
Next,
IO, Hunter.
you can use email marketing services from Job Contacts, Snov.io, and Hunter.
Адреса электронных почт наших потенциальных.
So this way you can collect the email addresses of your potential targets. And then you may want to validate them,
Какие могут использоваться в качестве
because naturally not all accounts will be active. And some accounts will be used as a multi-tenant or a family account.
видеть, ну, такой стандарт
Shown here is the infrastructure.
инфраструктуры. Но здесь, наверное, комментировать особо
So you can see here a kind of standardized infrastructure. I'm not sure I need to comment on anything here.
фишинговых сообщений. Мы используем
And note that for dispatching phishing messages,
email,
we will be using third-party services of companies doing
что это дает.
email marketing.
Как бы вы свой SMTP
I'm talking about companies like Mailgun and the like.
скрупулезно не подходили к созданию
This is obviously easy and convenient. Like you can
SPF, DKR,
configure your mail domain, you can set up SPF and other security mechanisms, but then eventually
использование mail.
you will reach a stage when all the good letters will end up in spam.
Все письма у вас будут доходить до
But if you're using Mailgun and similar services, you pretty much ensure that all your letters, and phishing letters as well, will be delivered to the mailbox of users.
GoFish. Наверное, всем
Now let's discuss all the components of infrastructure real quick. GoFish is a well-known open source utility
плюс
that we use to manage our phishing projects.
можно прям
You can see its interface here in the GIF.
есть
So you can easily tweak the templates of your messages there. There are also some stats there. You can
удобненько.
easily see, say, pie charts for how the percentage of letters were successfully delivered and so on.
В Казахстане мы обсуждали
I spoke at Kazakhstan conference last year where we discussed red teaming infrastructure, and in particular, we talked about GoFish there. So if you're interested, please check it out. The link is below.
это
Another important component of our infrastructure is Evil Jinx.
знакомая утилита для байпаса
Again, I'm assuming that everybody knows this utility for bypassing two-factor authentication,
TOTP.
where the second factor
Софтверная реализация.
is based,
Мы можем
is software-based in TLP,
ну, то есть,
and it can be easily bypassed using Evil Jinx. Now, for those who somehow don't know about it, it's a reverse proxy service where a user
соответственно, так как мы, ну,
follows our link
man in the middle,
to a phishing resource. It's effectively a man-in-the-middle attack, meaning that all requests go through us. And this way, we intercept logins and passwords,
соответственно,
and we also get the token for the second factor.
анонсировал три.
So last week, the author of this utility announced version 3 for Evil Jinx.
Учел
And in my screenshot, you can see the changelog. So Kuba Gretzky says that he has implemented all the requests from the community, and the link will take you
инструмент.
to his recent presentation.
Это такой, ну, я
Next one is Evil GoFish.
страстной любви между GoFish и EvilJinx.
I was about to say that it's the fruit of love of GoFish and Evil Jinx.
То есть,
At least the author tried to do that. He tried to combine them into a single utility.
мы можем сейчас
There are some new functions there, including SMS campaign support.
смишингу проводить прям из интерфейса.
In fact, you can run pretty much any smishing campaign right from the interface of Evil GoFish.
Далее. Плюс ко всему, прямо из коробки есть поддержка Google Recaptcha.
And right out of the box,
Turnstile.
it will support Google Recapture and Cloudflare Turnstile, which are obviously services designed to automate protection against bots. It also has got custom fishlets scanning the internet looking for our custom pages. There are also some additional features which are not part of the original utilities. And also, right off the box, it's supposed to removal of all indicators of compromise, like axe headers and whatever. This is the obvious thing you would want to find in attack tools or red teaming tools. Now, let's talk about payload delivery. For that, we use open source open source utility called Moondrop by the same author, by the way, Kuba Gretzky. So it's a web server that enables us to host payloads and spoof file extensions and change MIME type on the fly. HTTP and WebDAV are all gracefully supported. So the project is easy to find on GitHub. Another one is Lots Project, living off trusted sites. Mr. Docs, the author, has tried to combine here the services that enable us to host our payloads on trusted domains. And this could be consumer cloud services or, infrastructure of large providers. Next one is IPFS. Threat actors have been using it a lot lately. I think that if you call any service interplanetary, that does sound fancy, doesn't it? So this is a decentralized P2P network for file storage and transfer, which is sort of like BitTorrent, but you can access it over HTTP. And the last link here is a list of public gateways you can use to access IPFS, which is very convenient. So you parse it from there, and then you add those addresses to, for example, the list that you have on your perimeter. There are so many ways of delivering a payload to your potential victims. For example, you can use messengers that do support attachment dispatch. So many of them, and lots of them are not controlled within the corporate perimeter. You can send personal messages even on LinkedIn. During the time of the pandemic, I think most people have already gotten used to QR codes. So I guess all of you are comfortable scanning QR codes in the menu. QR codes in a restaurant to read the menu or tip the waiter. Now, UX dark buttons shown here. So what you see here is an element of design. However obtrusive it may be. So if you click it, it will take you to a given landing page, I guess. That could be very good for profiling, This way you can profile your users by browser version, for example. Now here, it also looks like a bit of dust or something, and you may want to remove it, but be careful, you can accidentally press the hidden button there. I think... Okay, so select one card that you like and prepare for magic to happen. Try to associate the card that you chose, maybe with a historical figure or a literary figure. It could be Peter the Great, or Queen Margaret, or Catherine II, or Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth. Now you need to squeeze your eyes for 3 seconds, otherwise magic is not going to work. Now imagine that person there sitting on a throne. They have this crown surrounded by an entourage. Now I hope that this picture comes alive in your mind, and I hope you've all done that. And now Raise your hand if your card is no longer in the screen. Great, half of you.
Ну, надеюсь,
I'm no magician, really,
в чем же тут, соответственно говоря,
but
магия.
my magic seems to have worked.
Ну вот на этом скриншоте
What's the magic?
соответственно, те карты, которые я вам показывал, сверху одна,
So you can see the cards I showed first.
снизу совсем противоположная. Ну и причем же здесь...
And you can see that all the cards below are actually different.
Сейчас попозже расскажу.
And you may be wondering, what has it got to do with phishing or social engineering? And before I answer this rhetorical question, I gotta tell you about the two best books
специалиста, который по долгу своей
for any offensive security expert.
симуляции фишинговых кампаний. То есть, соответственно,
So if you're doing simulation or phishing campaigns, not for profit, but it's part of your job,
буквально
you absolutely got to read both books.
о их содержании. Дэниел Канман.
So I will tell you very briefly about the content. I think that you all know the book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Он предложил такую концепцию, что наше
Old gold, shall I say.
поделено на две системы.
But
Быстрое мышление и медленное.
if somehow you don't remember what he wrote, he talked about two systems, system one, system two. System one is fast, intuitive, unconscious, automatic,
Соответственно, вторая система, которая занимает всего 5%,
and doesn't need to be activated.
медленное мышление.
And system two, which only counts for 5% of our thinking at best,
За принятие решений.
is actually very effortful. It is responsible for the high-level cognitive functions, for analysis.
Она, ну,
It's more reliable. It's not,
ну и, соответственно, причем здесь
it is also error-prone, just like System 1. But
в данном случае, если вы помните,
given that it's less unconscious,
первый набор карт
it's easier to identify those errors.
активировалась,
So when I show the first selection of cards,
которая у нас отвечает
System 1 must have been activated for you, and it is responsible for processing the information around about the environment.
С использованием наших органов чувств. Дальше, соответственно, ну вот, когда я, помните, рассказывал относительно ставьте, визуализируйте и так далее, я попытался активировать вашу
When I told you that you had to visualize something,
медленным мышлением, но
this was me talking to System 2.
фантазию за вот создание
System 2 began because System 2 is responsible for daydreaming and
картинку, попытался
fantasizing.
и, соответственно говоря, таким образом
Maybe you didn't play along,
направлении.
but I tried to lead your thinking towards System 2.
Мы тоже будем использовать дальше на практике. Это Роберт Чалдини.
The second book
Искусство
I recommended was another old gold by Robert Cialdini, Influence or the Six Principles of Influence.
терминологии Чалдини. Соответственно, здесь мой вольный перевод, и мы сейчас буквально полминутки поговорим о них. То есть первый принцип,
Now we'll discuss them real quick.
то, что называется quid pro quo. Это, ну,
Now, first principle of influence is reciprocity or quid pro quo.
ну, то есть всем знакомая ситуация.
Giving an example should work better here.
Поздравляет вас с днем рождения. После этого
So imagine that an acquaintance of yours
в телефоне создаете, например,
sends you birthday greetings.
вот этот принцип здесь.
And, after you've thanked him for the greetings, you may even set yourself a reminder to congratulate this person with their birthday when it happens.
Доказательство, social proof, ну, говорит о том, что
Now, consistency, we feel compelled to be consistent with what we've said or done in the past. Social proof, like 50 people with torches and pitchforks cannot be wrong.
такое.
Liking, authority, scarcity, well, these are so well-known things, really. We tend to, for example, obey figures of authority,
Времени, срочность,
people who inspire us.
это такой стереотип.
Scarcity is about lack of time, among other things.
Ограничение по времени. Ну, то есть
Well, time is always limited in any case.
самых любимых приемов злоумышленников. Все вы помните, как
This is usually one of the most
быстро
popular things with threat actors. They always tell you, you gotta act fast to save your money or whatever.
А сейчас мы с вами поговорим о практике. Вот на моем скриншоте вы можете видеть пример фишингового,
Now let's get practical.
который мы прямо использовали.
Shown here is an example of a phishing letter that we used in a real project.
Call to
So let's study it.
призыва к действию. То есть
It all starts with a call to action.
по многочисленным
So let me read it out.
наша внутренняя система конфликта
Hello, dear colleagues.
адрес.
Due to numerous requests, our internal Confluence wiki system is moving to an external domain address in order to make it more convenient so that you don't need to access it through VPN. Please check if you can access it in its new address. So we try to trigger consistency here, right? Because we say, well, there have been numerous requests. And numerous requests also suggest that there is social proof. And we say, well, it's for your convenience. You no longer need to do authentication, to do all this VPN, stupid things.
Дальше, соответственно, следующий абзац — это distraction, то есть элемент отвлечения.
Next one is a distraction.
Внимание, важное напоминание. Администраторы пространств несут ответственность за
An important reminder. Administrators will be responsible for uploading confidential information in their sections.
Чувствуют себя очень обязательным, если даже на практике это не так.
Well, people tend to believe they're very responsible, even when they aren't. And here we're trying to activate the system that's responsible for slow thinking, but we try to send it on a fool's journey, on a fool's errand.
Well,
the next sentence actually says that we recommend limiting access to pages with any data which is not designed for public use. Next one is evasion.
Мы пишем, что сервис Confluence по старому адресу будет.
So we say that Confluence service will also be available over VPN in the old address.
Он транслируется в рамках, ну, наверное, всех security awareness тренингов как самый такой.
I think that all security awareness trainings will tell you that if you see scarcity being triggered, this is usually a surefire giveaway of a phishing message. So here we try to play down by saying, well, you can still keep using the old one, no problem. And then there is a signature that, you know, with due respect, this is signed by the head of the information technology department. And if you have any questions, please respond to this email.
Кусочек отчета, его замазал. Это результаты.
So I take a piece of report here.
Я здесь зачитаю, смешно будет. К тому же,
So let me read it out.
что стоит отметить, что пользователь.
We also need to point out that user such and such opened the letter 13 times. He entered his crest 3 times. He shared the link with the colleagues who were not in the list of approved contacts. Which means that this pretext worked very well. So you see, this person opened it 13 times and shared it with his colleagues. Then in our interface, we actually saw that we had more accounts, valid accounts, than we expected to have. I mean, it's such a good pretext that our efficiency ratio was 110%. Where am I getting at here? You shouldn't really punish the employees who were duped with social engineering of red teamers, because these people in the future can become your security champions if you do it right. Do not take their bonuses away. Do not punish them, because the effect you will achieve by doing this will be counterproductive. Now, we found this great practice in a company, and that company is pretty sophisticated when it comes to information security. They run social engineering campaigns like every week internally, sending various payloads using various pretexts. And then they say, well, a user such and such really wanted to have a new iPhone. That's why they follow the link and enter their credentials. You know, they make fun of their employees, but they do it gently and works like a charm. You know, people read about their own gullibility in those digests. They're never punished. They're slightly ridiculed, and therefore they try to do better next time.
А мы идем далее, перейдем к более таким техническим вещам, поговорим о типах пейлодов.
Now let's get more technical. Let's discuss types of payloads. as well as evasion and obfuscation. Let me start by saying a few words about Microsoft. Last year, Microsoft did a lot in order to fight phishing. They did block macroses. Actually, macroses have been blocked since Office 2013, but users were allowed to enable content and keep using macroses. But Microsoft decided to do more and block this possibility for unblocking macroses. Interestingly, a month after that announcement, Microsoft said, well, we got so much negative feedback, we'll probably need to unblock him. And a month later, they decided to block him again. And hence the meme here. Maybe they were trying to confuse threat actors with all these changes. And what is dead cannot die. So there is this format of extensions for Microsoft Excel. I'm talking about XLA. It was initially designed for Office 97. XLAM is an add-in for Office 2007, which is effectively a zip archive containing XML. Do remember this Game of Thrones quote, I guess. So if we send a self-signed XLA file or XLM, this yellow security warning or trust bar will not pop up. But a dialog window will pop up, which will enable you to run this macros, activating our payload. How can you fight that? If you're hardening Windows, Microsoft Office locally, you'll need to find this tab called VSTO and other. So apparently, if you put a tick there, you're going to block all extensions, including XLA and XLM. This, unfortunately, is not the case.
Дальше буквально несколько слов стоит сказать о Mark of the Web. Наверное, многим знакомый механизм.
Next one is Mark of the Web.
Защиту устройств от запуска файлов, загруженных из недоверенной сети.
So this should protect devices from launching files downloaded from untrusted parts of the network. So it's running on TFS adds alternate data stream. So it adds a separate attribute called a zone identifier. Then your browser or some other application you're using should sort of consult with it. There are 5 zone identifiers. Local computer at 0, and this way the user will not be shown any warning system. Internet, trusted sites, internet, and restricted sites at number 4.
Well, obviously,
the system was designed to secure users. However, not all vendors are serious about implementing it in their solutions. For example, in the screenshot, you can see 7-zip, a pretty well-known, a very popular archival utility. I think it is the latest version of 7-zip only that at least supports Mark of the Web, although by default it's switched off. So in order for you to switch it on, you need to open their GUI and put a tick. I actually recommend you all do that. Another example is the well-known Git client, which bypasses it really. Well, you can see their logic, like GitHub. GitHub is a large repository. If every time you download something, it will be bad security warning. This will create bad customer experience. Now let's talk about delivering payload. WinRAR, in its 6.11 latest version, does support Mark of the Web, but only for some MS Office file types. So we can be sending HTML, HTA, or CHM which is an archival format where you can squeeze several web pages simultaneously. So right to left to the right is a very well-known technique. It has been used for, 30 years, and it's still relevant. So this way, he drops the subject. HTA is a somewhat overused format. It has been used by threat actors a lot. That's why I prefer using CHM, which is a Microsoft's compiled HTML help, which is a proprietary binary archive format. And some defensive perimeter solutions do not really know how to unarchive it. So in fact, it can be opened in any text editor with HTA, but for CHM you would need additional software. And screenshots show that, CHM does seem a bit less dangerous. If you follow the link on the left, you'll see a report on APT41, also known as a Wicked Panda. They use it a lot, which means it works. Next one is obfuscation of payloads. A very well-known technique is HTML smuggling, and it dates back to 2018. The link will take you to Outflank, the authors of HTML smuggling, with a detailed description. So HTML5 contains this download attribute for kind of association tags. We can actually combine it here with JavaScript blocks, which is effectively an object, which is a byte array, and which enables creating file structures for the users. So the idea is like this. We send a link to a web server we control. Could be, say, an attached HTML file as part of an archive. And all your defensive solutions to the perimeter believe it's a regular HTML, and it's okay for HTML to have some JavaScript embedded. That's how the internet works. But this way, you can easily bypass so many defenses. And then when the user follows the link or opens the attachment, well, the file is downloaded directly. And mark of the web, by the way, here. It drops subject. It will work when you have initial foothold already, but you need to expand your attack, and you're using phishing as an attack vector. So, for example, you may want to host it inside the network, or if you want to go to trusted sites. Alternatively, you can do a lat move from subsidiary to the holding company. I've mentioned 7-zip already, and shown here is its latest version, where mark of the web is switched off by default. So if you launch a binary file, you will see this blue window. For some reason, it's called upscreen. And like I said, it's a good idea to switch mark of the web by default. And Cozy Bear APT29 has been using this technique since 2016, and it has been quite effective since then. So they keep alternating types of payload, but the technique stays the same. So in the 7-zip archive, you'll find the LNK file, which contains a legitimate utility, OneDrive update. And then it initiates a DLL sideloading technique to download malicious DLL, giving them remote access to the workstation of their victim. Now imagine that our victims or targets are developers, and this is a common case, say, in supply chain attacks.
Давайте сначала расскажу вот пример. Здесь опять же по ссылке есть отчет Microsoft Security на основе...
So you'll see this Microsoft Security reports behind the link.
Это северокорейским хакерам, якобы. Ну и то есть...
They attributed it to North Korean hackers, and that's a classic example of Angler phishing.
Зарегистрировали аккаунты в социальных сетях.
So a threat actor or threat actress got themselves accounts on Twitter and LinkedIn. They created a blog where they published some pretty good security research. So they masqueraded as a legitimate cybersecurity company. So they would communicate with members of the cybersecurity community. And by doing this, they established some level of trust, maybe even rapport. And from that moment on, they started sending information like this. See, I've got this exploit, or I've got this popular software, but it doesn't seem to working. Can you help me debugging it? Since they had a history of previous communication, there was a modicum of trust. So they were hoping that since they had this modicum of trust, the other person would download the Visual Basic project and would compile it and thus would get infected. But it did work for some people. This way they got shells with quite a lot of developers. So they used a pre-build event, but they could also use custom build events. And pre-build event is, a build event which is launched during code compilation. So they would start PowerShell, and inside they would run on DLL. Their thinking was that the person who downloaded their project, I'm gonna put it differently. Had that person opened their project in the text editor before opening it in VBS, they would say it's weird. That's actually a good idea if you are downloading any projects from sources you do not necessarily trust. Now, let's imagine that a developer is technically savvy, and before they start compiling it, they always review it. What would you do to them? And let's agree on some terminology here. The very well-known terminology is component objective model. So let me remind you that on Windows we have two components, and they can be talking to each other using each other's functionality. If, for example, they can be registered as COM objects, one is a COM server, the other is a COM client. I think it will be easier to understand with a particular example. Say, with Microsoft, you may want to, say, run a particular, say, table or a diagram. Or there may be objects that are not registered in the system. Van would want to use Typelib, which is a proprietary binary library format which is compiled using middle.exe compiler, and it can be stored in TLB files, or it can be embedded as resources into executable files such as DLLs. And there's finally nested typelibs, and the name explains it all. They're nested. Moniker, something that software developers know very well. Monikers are objects required to identify other objects. They enable you to maintain pointers to other objects without using class IDs. So this way you pretty much address them by the name. So let me show the flow here. So Microsoft C++ preprocessor compiler uses the import directive to load typelib, which can be nearby as a project type, or it can be hosted elsewhere. So you can address it using, say, webdev. So then it will parse a link to any nested library. And then it will initiate a Windows scripting host, something called scriptlet.
И дальше, соответственно, используя функцию mkparse_display_name, проанализирует строку.
Then mkparse_display_name function is initiated, and then we do bind to object with a moniker. So we do bind to object with a scrubj DLL.
Функцию bind to object.
And scrubj is linked to Windows scripting host.
DLL загрузит и выполнит.
And then scrubj.dll will
на VBS, JavaScript, JScript.
Run a script, SCT script on VBS script, a JavaScript, a JS script. And this way, we get remote access to the workstation of a given developer. Now let's imagine that our developer is really paranoid. They review the code, he's just plain paranoid all over the place. So imagine that, well, they must be running Git, right? It's their developer, so we send them Visual Studio, and we want the payload to be executed when Visual Studio started, not when it's compiled. So in Visual Studio, there is the properties window where you can easily review the properties of objects in the editor, for example. In the property window, there will be a pop-up window generated by help_string DLL, which sort of obviously gives you some useful tips about the objects. And there is also a function called DLL get documentation, which is used in order to point to a library of localized version of the help file, so to speak. So imagine you've got your internal reference system in different languages. So with the load typelib, COM_ADI will parse help-free DLL, and then with the DLL get documentation, the localized version of the library will be initiated, and it does contain our malicious code. And Stan Hegt from Outflank made a great report on that particular subject, so if you guys are interested, please check it out. I absolutely recommend that you sign up. So subscribe to Outflank. The guys are doing some really great red teaming work. We keep learning from them. And let's turn to conclusions and recommendations now. I've got technical and social recommendations. Two buckets. Let's start with the technical bucket. First one is in-depth or multi-layer defense.
Скажем так, на всех этапах цепочки Cyber Kill Chain должны быть реализованы защитные...
I'm assuming that across all the stages of your Cyber Kill Chain, you need to have diverse defenses. This includes your sandbox, your email gateway, you know, whatever scanners you have for malicious attachments. You know, all the way from reconnaissance to exfiltration. You need to have detection and compensation and mitigation and whatever. It would be great to provide redundancy for such defense systems. Well, you all know what times we're living through. So any magic box you're using today can easily turn into a pumpkin, like in this fairy tale, any time of the day. So you do want redundancy. FIDO2 is another recommendation. It's a very well-known standard for passwordless authentication. I do understand that something like this can be quite expensive for a large organization. Moreover, you'll need to give every employee 2 keys, and that requires buying them somewhere. However, by doing this, you are going to protect yourself from a whole class of initial harvesting attacks. Moreover, with this standard, you do harden the workstations of your employees. Well, next, you need to set up configurations of your defenses. Remember what I said previously about blocking add-ons? I mean, that's easy. or at least it sounds easy.
На практике действительно ли мы все отключили?
So you got to make sure that all your employees are following those security recommendations.
По майту,
Next, you need to
в формате PayPal teaming,
check if all the public methods
либо вы
for obtaining initial foothold according to MITRE.
пробили, получили доступ, пошли дальше выполнять, реализовывать бизнес-риски, а зарабатывают последовательно.
I'm sorry. So it's effectively a recommendation to
Приватные методики, которыми
institutionalize, so to speak, purple teaming.
различные варианты payloadов, цепочки и так
So experiment different payloads, different pretexts, different delivery techniques.
Defense и cyber deception. Ну, здесь в большей степени, наверное,
Now, as regards active defense and cyber deception,
но очень эффективные методики размещения.
I have a statement to make about canary tokens. They cost you nothing. So you imagine you create a fake employee on your LinkedIn
Его почту, дальше мониторить его почтовые
and you put up his email, then you just monitor his email.
сотрудник
And the moment you see emails coming there, since he is a fake employee, that should tell you that something is brewing around your company.
Дальше, соответственно, регулярное проведение социотехнических этапов в рамках в составе работы по тестированию на проникновение.
Regular social engineering trainings, but rather tests.
Таким образом пробьете. Ну, я, конечно, понимаю, но в данном случае все-таки рекомендую всегда...
I find it so funny when clients tell red teamers, we're not considering social engineering as a vector for this particular test. Like, have you officially recognized that this is how you can be hacked easily?
Я
Well, human factor is so powerful.
здесь прям
Security awareness trainings are all the rage.
сотрудника очень классно работает, но стоит к этому подходить немножко дифференцированно. То есть у нас есть разные
At the same time, I recommend differentiated approach here. We do have different trainings for executives, developers, help desk, and other groups of employees.
руководители у нас жертвы ВВ.
Well, because for different groups of people,
Ну, они
you will be seeing different pretexts being used.
вот на awareness тренингах
Like developers know much more than help desk employees about phishing, so they will be bored in your regular trainings.
транслировать ее на подразделение
Well, I mentioned security champions idea. I think
всех компаний,
this is indeed a very good practice.
чемпионов в своих подразделениях
I recommend developing those security champions in your companies.
в своем подразделении будет не только свои
They can be like the ambassadors of cybersecurity in their own divisions
своих коллег и тех, кто работает рядом.
on a kind of a voluntary basis.
Своевременное информирование сотрудников о попытках
And finally, informing employees in time about current phishing attacks. What happens quite often is that cybersecurity people
отправляют также по всей
notice a phishing campaign.
электронную почту письмо о оповещении. Ну,
And, very often they will be informing their employees using, say, emails, the same channel. Most people read their emails chronologically. So imagine the first thing you see is a phishing letter.
у нас такие
And the security alert from cybersecurity team will be like 5 letters below it. It will be too late by the time they get there.
вытекающие из этого рекомендация относительно вот именно регулярного
A related recommendation
что на нас проводились
is about regular information.
разбором методик.
So you need to explain to your own employees in a town hall meeting or something that, we are being attacked. And, this is a recent attack. This is what they did. These were the pretexts used. So be vigilant.
Большое спасибо за внимание.
Which puts the lid on my presentation. Thank you very much.
Здравствуйте, спасибо за доклад.
Hello, thanks for the presentation.
Про методы решения с помощью автоматизации.
You mentioned, I understand, automation.
С использованием машинного обучения.
I'm wondering if you've been trying, or if anybody else has been trying to use ML here.
Увлекаюсь немножко машин-лернингом. Ну и
I am
решений.
a fan of machine learning, though I'm not too hot on that. There are ML-based solutions. I'm not enough of an expert to pass a judgment on them. But I can tell you that machine learning, just like the other state-of-the-art areas, so to speak, are being implemented now. Just like ChatGPT, I think, is often used to develop pretexts, to correct grammar, select better wording. And I do hope that bright future is going to be ours very.
Вопрос такой более общий. Есть популярное мнение, что фишинг является одной
There is this popular opinion
проникновения.
that phishing is one of the easiest methods of penetration. And therefore,
Популярное мнение это
you won't see great technical experts doing phishing. Would you agree with that? I certainly won't. Do you have a second question?
такое есть.
In fact, I disagree with it myself, but it is a pretty popular opinion.
В том, что если ты знаешь, как составить фишинговое письмо, ты знаешь, что сделать с кредами, которые
Like people often say that if you know how to concoct a phishing letter and you know what to do once you establish remote access.
например, будет более простой, потому что фишинги
Okay, let's drop it.
20 на 80, 20%
I think that Pareto principle applies to phishing as well. Like 20% of activity is giving 80% of results.
Согласен с этим утверждением, потому что, на самом деле,
I disagree with the statement.
очень популярный и наиболее эффективный, согласно
Phishing is a very popular and statistically speaking the most effective technique.
Тут уже просто там HTA слать не получится. То есть
If you try sending HTA, however, people won't be opening those letters. They have been enough security awareness trainings.
но
So it has been very effective recently, so defenses are getting better.
еще немножко копну глубже, что человек это такое слабое звено, типа прошивка не патчилась.
In fact, I disagree with the statement that humans are the weakest link.
Предположим, забайпасили все технические решения, злоумышленники очень...
Now imagine that threat actors have been very technical, have been able to bypass all the technical solutions. Maybe they're using something, in terms of rocket science. And the person who activates or doesn't activate the payload is ultimately, the last stage of defense. So if the person has been properly trained, if they know that they shouldn't really open those attachments, well, that is pretty good hardening of your defenses, isn't it?
Спасибо большое за презентацию. Шикарно выступили.
Hello, thanks for the presentation.
К машинному
You
обучению
rock the stage.
или есть ли какие-то варианты персонализированного фишинга, то есть, например, по отделам или по возрастному какому-то.
I am wondering about personalized phishing.
60+, да, ему там котиков шлют.
Like if we have a 60 plus, he will be getting pictures of kittens, and a person like 20 something, he will be getting TikTok messages.
Вот смотрите, относительно...
But that's a good one, thank you.
Я скажу относительно атаки. При проведении spear phishing...
I know little about defense, so let me tell you about attacks. So when we simulate spear phishing as part of red teams,
анализируем человека...
what we do is develop a profile. We analyze persons' accounts in social media to see what they're interested in.
То есть здесь
For example, if we are doing whaling of a well-known speaker,
закрытое мероприятие.
what we can do, we can, for example, invite him to speak at an exclusive event.
И насколько человек, как бы сказать...
That will be the pretext, right?
Но есть обратная...
And the specific invitation will be based on, their public profile.
Если речь у нас идет, опять же, о вейлинге, если это высокопоставленные лица...
Now, if we're talking about whaling, if these are C-level officers, well, they have people running their social media for them.
Не всегда сами.
Moreover, these people, in most cases, will not be reading their emails. Again, they will have PAs doing that.
Доклад, вот такой вопрос, возвращаясь к способу фишинга с помощью VBA макроса. Вот Вы перечисляли
I'm wondering about DBA macros
там вот
used in phishing, and you have mentioned various software, you mentioned Office. I'm wondering
многие
if it's still a relevant phishing type, because many
Сами макросы
software
относительно определенных
is no longer
документов,
supported.
приложение Excel, будь то, там,
Well,
не знаю,
macros, be it for
PowerPoint,
Excel
это
or a
разные
PowerPoint
номера.
or Word.
Но вот если
Well, this is
которых под капотом тот же
a
самый.
dying breed. So
Ну, в общем-то говоря, это работает.
under the hood,
Почему относительно
they all have VBA, and VBA
приложения,
still
ну,
works.
может быть, кнопочка в интерфейсе. Это есть расширение. То есть в данном случае вот это, ну, хорошо работает.
But there are also extensions, like a button over there.
Случай, ну, такой весьма условный. То есть установив расширение при каждом...
This way you're going to gain persistence, and
Ну, и таким образом...
every time this software is launched, it will be running your payload. So it's not proper persistent, but it's some persistence at
За
least.
выступление. У меня такой вопрос.
Hello, thanks for the presentation.
Что нельзя наказывать сотрудника, который стал жертвой
You said it was a bad idea to punish employees who fell victim to social engineering and phishing.
чемпионом. А что делать
They potentially can become security champions.
или администратор?
What if such a victim is an admin or a cybersecurity professional?
Фишинговое письмо.
Imagine the following scenario. An employee gets a phishing letter.
Проверь, посмотри.
He sends it to an admin or a security officer, asking him to check it. And this way,
Ваше мнение?
the threat actor gets admin rights. So, do you think they gotta be punished or fired?
То есть, ну, хвалить точно...
Well,
То есть наказывать...
I do not believe in firing,
Какие-то санкции
but
относительно...
certainly that's a bad case.
премии, там, выговор объявим. Ну, они...
You know what?
Противоположные эффекты.
When you punish people, when you take their bonuses away,
Думают, что, ну, в
you
общем,
defeat transparency.
А что касается вот именно, ну, сотрудников...
People will no longer report their concerns or their failures to you.
Такого рода атак, наверное, стоит... Ну, ничего хорошего...
Well, we are there to identify attacks. I mean, if you're a cybersecurity professional and you're dumb enough to launch the payload,
Что-то стоит сделать, но...
that's bad. Again, if it's done for the first time ever, I won't really act on that. I will talk to them relatively nicely.
Вот вы говорили, что в качестве меры можно
Everybody can screw once.
рассылку от ИБ департамента по сотрудникам с какими-то предостережениями. А что делать в том
So you mentioned that
эту рассылку, представляясь сотрудниками ИБ департамента?
Security people can get in touch with everybody. But what if the threat actors are representing, masquerading as a cybersecurity department? Oh, we actually had a case like this. So we had this simple phishing message, easy to identify as phishing, and then we followed it with a letter pretending to be a letter from the cybersecurity team. You got to harden. We're under attack. You got to harden defenses. We need a team effort here. It did work like a charm.
На кухне, мы получили фишинг, там, ха-ха-ха, какие не глупые, шлют фигню.
So people would actually first have a laugh about those stupid phishing attempts,
Мы пишем, говорим, вот...
and they would fall for the next letter.
Нужно срочно там что-то сделать, пойти рассказать...
Like, we have a new second factor authentication. You got to do this and this right away.
Такой сценарий, да.
Enter your
Мы, по
creds.
крайней мере, применяли.
This is something that we used quite successfully.
Добрый день, спасибо за доклад. У меня вопрос такой. Сейчас
Oh, thanks for the presentation.
появляются рабочие места на Linux. Это часто...
We are seeing more Linux workstations being used now, particularly in the public sector, hospitals and schools.
Вот вообще...
It's a growing segment for sure.
Никаких средств защиты.
In many cases, you see, these are Linux systems with no protection whatsoever, not even an AVS.
Вот это, по поводу компрометации Linux, будет ли тема на...
What do you think about compromising Linux? Do you think it will be a big thing?
Эти АПК никто не устанавливает. Вот в Linux...
In terms of Android, things are also lousy. Nobody installs APKs. On Linux, you will need to issue rights and make them start the terminal.
Найдется.
But there may be some easy attack vector available. And my second question.
Но почему бы фишинг
I understand it may trigger a holy war, but nonetheless,
будет много атак?
how about phishing is added to the scope of bug bounty programs? There will be lots of attacks and employees will be distracted, but then they will develop some immunity. Great questions. Let me start with the second one.
Он всегда за рамками скоупа. Плюс ко всему, я просто, понимаю,
Indeed, phishing is always outside the scope of bug bounty.
и, образно говоря,
It will be so painful to triage it, by the way.
по баг-баунти мы там делаем, да, баг-баунти пометку. Ну, то есть их будет разделять от, на самом деле, фишинговых атак и атак по баг-баунти, довольно сложно вот именно для триажа.
How are you going to actually triage them? I'm not entirely sure.
Респонс, вот те плейбуки, которые у нас, соответственно, задействованы при получении фишинга.
I understand that this could also be good for training incident response, making sure that employees really learn their playbooks by heart.
Либо дежурный смены СОК, либо что-то такое.
Say, cybersecurity person or a shift manager at SOC press the right sequence of buttons. I'm not an expert at structuring bug bounty programs, so maybe it is possible. Now, what you said about Linux is a very smart idea. We do see lots of organizations switching to Linux.
Если мы говорим о Red Team, там есть мы подбираем вот именно
As red teamers,
всех подразделений. То есть, если технические специалисты перейдут на Linux, у них и так Linux, они его используют.
we are usually attacking various cohorts of users, including techies.
Не очень скоро.
Like developers can easily turn to Linux. Can you expect accountants to start using Linux?
Вот в данном
Nah, I don't think so.
случае идут по...
Unless there is a browser version of the software they're using.
Но при этом нужно заняться...
So I think that threat actors will take the path of least resistance.
Это, российский...
So I'm expecting them to keep focusing on Windows machines.
Известный мой офис. У него также есть...
Well, take, for example, my office. It is available for different systems, and there are macroses for my office, or мой office in Russian.
Вот примерно так.
Спасибо большое за доклад. У меня будет два вопроса непосредственно по
I have two questions.
рассылке. Вы сказали, что используете в основном
One is about email campaigns.
рассылок. Вот у
So
меня
you mentioned that you primarily use GoFish.
как вы осуществляете сбор и анализ статистики, потому что GoFish, он
How do you collect and analyze your statistics? Because in terms of stats, GoFish is pretty
средства для анализа и сбора статистики.
simplistic, but it does have a great API. So do you use your proprietary solution for statistics? Do you analyze it manually, or do you use a third-party tool for analysis?
Допустим, с
My second question is about payload.
GoFish,
Since the October release,
записывать все параметры
GoFish has learned how to
в XLM файлах.
automatically maintain all parameters in Docker and other files. Are you using any automated tools to indicate parameters for other payloads?
GoFish, да, мы используем кастомизированную версию. На самом деле там просто...
Indeed, we are using a customized version for statistics.
кода, потому что, комьюнити за много лет...
You don't really need to code anything, however, because over many years, the community has developed lots and lots of solutions, including notifications. For example,
Заканчивая, опять же,
you can be getting credentials
GoFish,
on Telegram.
где можно реализовать все, что...
And there is also a great API from Goldfish.
На самом деле, хотел включить это в презентацию, боялся, что не успеем. То есть, во-первых, что касается вот именно, я не до конца согласен со статистикой по, скажем так,
I do not agree fully
обычно это как критерий.
with stats like a number of letters opened. This is a metric you see in all the reports, but does it make sense? I mean, all letters are like designed to be opened. I mean, it does look good as a metric, but it
Второй,
doesn't tell you much.
что касается функциональности GoFish мы используем, плюс ко всему мы используем, и шлем
We do use the embedded functions in GoFish,
форматах. Мы всегда используем
and we also use payloads in different formats.
плюс ко всему очень удобно в отчет это все потом
And we also may want to identify payloads as ours or not.
где-то забыли либо доступ потеряли. И
And then we also want to make sure that IOCs are deletable.
такой
Another important thing
необходимо каким-то образом маркировать. Есть open-source софт.
is that we certainly need to mark it up properly, and we do use open source software, and we do have a custom version of the tool. I think we'd best take this discussion off stage, though.
Здравствуйте, у меня такой вопрос по поводу обучения персонала.
I have this question about training, staff training. You have mentioned that you need to train all categories of employees, but then there is this opinion that you only need to give a single employee. So imagine that before the security awareness training, 40% of phishing emails would be open. Now, after the training, 5% get open, but in a large corporation, that's already hundreds of people. What's the benefit of a security awareness training that drops, this threshold from 40% to 5%? Should we instead focus on high risk groups like executives or accountants? Well, 40 to 5% is a very good job, if you ask me. I do agree that a single successful phishing victim can open the Pandora's box. Moreover, this principle of multi-layered defense, the principle of zero trust, for example, should apply here. So you need to make sure that accountants' rights are very limited, so that it is more difficult for the threat actor to wreak havoc in the system, even if a particular accountant is duped. This way, we should at least have the possibility at any stage to identify threat actors and kick them out of our infra. I think this kind of approach would be more effective. And as regards running social awareness trainings for all the employees, I don't think that security awareness trainings are that expensive. And if they indeed reduce this metric from 40% to 5%, they are certainly worth it. I love that question. And the question coming from his neighbor as well.
Спасибо.